Well, thank you, Senator. It's great to be here. I'm only going to take an hour and a half, just kidding. This is an important subject. We didn't put it at the end because we don't think it's important. We believe that transportation are one of the key issues. We talked about health care today. We talked about growing our economy. We talked about K-12 education. This is just as important. And I know we've been through a very tough time and a very contentious election over the T-SPLOST. And I would just say, there's no one who was on either side should be vilified. Because, as we said, there were some good reasons to support it, and there were some good reasons to be opposed to it. But I have great dear friends who I very much respect on both sides, and I think we all did. But we also said we have got to do something. We cannot sit here and feel sorry for ourselves. We need to move forward, and that's really the purpose of what we're doing today. We don't have all the details. We called it Plan B, so everyone always said there's no Plan B. But really, these are just some ideas to get us moving forward. And because this is so important, and a lot of these are not new ideas. We've done lots of studies. There have been lots of great efforts, not just the T-SPLOST, but going back to many other studies that have been done. There's good information out there that we need to look at. And we're going to go over just a few of those. First thing, I think this became pretty obvious, and this was a surprise to me as well. We've got to build trust. For whatever reason, there's been some turnover at DOT, and there's been different issues that have come up, but we've got to be able to build trust. And one way we can start is transparency. And that takes a lot of different forms, but a very simple one would be something that the legislature does, something that many other boards do all across state government, and that's simply let's put the meetings of the Georgia DOT online for everybody to see. The cameras are actually in the rooms where they meet. It'd be very simple, wouldn't cost anything. So let's add transparency. The second is reform. I believe we need to do something tangible. There are many opportunities to do that. There's places where we can consolidate. One thing we heard consistently, we've talked to people, and we've got to do something about this alphabet soup of agencies. We've got ARC and the State Road and Toll Authority and GRETA and the DOT and all these different agencies. Is there a better way, a simpler way of governance that we can coordinate what we're doing and the strategy for going forward? And finally, you win trust through performance. Now, I'm proud of the DOT. I think over many years, with very little money, we are consistently ranked as some of the best roads in the nation. Just last year, we were ranked number 1 in getting projects done on time and number 2 in the nation in getting projects done on or under budget. So a good fiscal conservative's got to like that. We're going to give them some more opportunities to prove themselves through performance. What next? Well, we believe you set high goals. In 1996, we brought the Olympics to town, A.D. Frazier, and made sure that we ran in a great Olympic Games, and we had a state-of-the-art intelligent transportation system put in place in Atlanta. Well, we've been quietly building upon that all these years. We've won many awards, but I think we can do better. Why not? We're the city where Georgia Tech is located. Can we not lead the world in intelligent transportation? Who knows what's going to be happening in 10 years from now? Google has already created cars that are driving automated, no driver in traffic in Europe. We don't know where we're going to be, but if we invest in intelligent transportation, we can be a leader in that industry. Not only is that going to help drivers, they can push information. Everybody's got one of these days. You can get real-time traffic information so you can determine whether to delay or reroute your trip. In fact, very soon, your car will be connected to the internet, and it will know and give you suggestions about routing around traffic. But just as importantly, how about transit? Think about the most dense cities in the world that have great subway systems. Tokyo, London, New York, Washington. What else do they have a lot of? Taxi cabs. Because even if you have a great subway system and any kind of transit system, you have the problem of the last mile. How do you get to that final destination? Well, like many of us, when you're going somewhere, you program it into your phone. With transit, you can get where you're going, and you look down, and it says your final destination is 1 mile away. It's 15 minutes estimated time to walk. But it may also tell you there's a shuttle that's going to be arriving at your location in 5 minutes, and it'll take you 3 minutes to get where you're going. And in fact, it's free. And in fact, you can look on your map and see that shuttle coming towards you because it has GPS implanted in it. It also could tell you that there's a Zipcar location 1 block to your north. I don't know if you don't live in Atlanta, you might not know what those are, but they're cars that you can rent by the hour. It could say, yes, there's a Zipcar location. In fact, there's a car there 1 block away. It's available. Press here to rent it. It's $10 an hour. It could also tell you that you have 3 taxi cabs within 2 miles of your location. Click here to hail the cab. Estimated fare is $4. All of that information on your phone with this intelligent transportation system, giving you choices so you're not worried about when that bus is coming or how am I going to get to that final destination. So we think this is a great opportunity. How about transit? Well, here we are at a conservative gathering, and we're going to talk about transit. We think that we have to build out a region-wide, high-capacity transit network. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, here are the goals. First of all, transit should be about economic opportunity. You heard Larry Reed talk today about freedom of opportunity. Well, if you don't have transportation, you often might not be able to get a good education. You get to college or a university class, you might have a hard time getting to job. If your car breaks down, you don't have a job problem, you have a transportation problem. So it's economic opportunity. It's mobility for those of us who are disabled or elderly. And yes, if we do it right, it can serve to mitigate traffic congestion. Here's our problem in Atlanta. Not everybody's going downtown. It's the everywhere to everywhere commuting pattern. There's many people going from Lawrenceville to Alpharetta or Alpharetta to Marietta as they are going to Midtown and downtown. It is almost impossible to design a rail-based system because of the cost that can do that. And I think we saw in the T-SPLOST plan, only a few rail options, and they were so very expensive. If you didn't get one in your area, you were going to have to wait 10, maybe 15 years to have another opportunity. Now, we've been called anti-transit before, and it drives us crazy. We are not anti-transit, but we are fiscal conservatives. We are anti-wasting money. We believe spending money on rail in Atlanta without the density that many of these other cities have, not only is it wasting money, but it's prohibiting us from building out this robust transit network that we need so people can get where they need to go. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to have to rely on buses. Everybody says, ooh, buses. You know, who wants to ride a bus? Well, look at this. Greta has very successfully run the Express Bus commuter program, and it's pretty popular. People that ride it, they say, hey, this is a great experience. We really like it. So you don't have to have that stigma of a bus. It's how you design it. But there's even something better. Bus rapid transit. This is being put in all around the world. It looks like a rail car. It feels like a light rail vehicle, but it's on rubber tires. It can drive in the median, in a dedicated lane, so we get them out of traffic. It can drive on the regular roads, and it can drive on all of our HOV or HOT managed lanes. So the trip times can be very competitive. And guess what? It's much, much cheaper. So that means we can build more of them and actually connect the network. Here's what a station looks like. It's not the typical covered bench that you've got at the bus stops. It's a very nice station. It doesn't take up much space. And with the intelligent transportation system, you know exactly when the next bus is coming. This is a picture from Rio de Janeiro. Very dense development, but their mayor has said, we can't afford to dig underground and build out a subway system. We are building out a high-capacity network with BRT. Now, this is a hard map to look at, but I wanted to show you what we're talking about. The yellow lines in this map represent BRT. They also would operate on the interstate systems, but you'll notice we put these on the arterials. So there are a lot of east-west lines, so people, where they're going, this everywhere to everywhere network can actually be built out, get people out of traffic, and provide very good quality of service. Well, what are we proposing on transit? We're going to talk about the fourth penny, but we propose spending $65 million a year on transit. Part of that money will be for local transit all across the state of Georgia. We'll provide matching grants. We've got an incredibly robust transit out in our rural areas in Georgia. Many people don't realize that. Paratransit and many others. We think we ought to help them develop their networks. This will help, of course, in Metro Atlanta as well. The express system, those buses that are so popular, let's continue to support them and expand the express bus system. MARTA. MARTA is critical. It is the core of our Metro Atlanta system, and it deserves our support. And bus rapid transit. This would allow us the money not just to put it on our interstate highways, but also to expand bus rapid transit along our arterials and relieve traffic congestion. On to roads. We think we've got to prioritize our road projects. Now, I talked to a lot of people during the T-SPLOST debate, and I feel pretty certain that you go to any region of our state, whether it was Atlanta or anywhere else, and you take the top third of the projects proposed in the T-SPLOST, and everyone agreed. Not controversial at all. Who in this room would argue that doing something about the 400-285 interchange is a bad idea? Those are the kinds of projects we need to identify and prioritize. The bottlenecks in Metro Atlanta, the ways of guaranteeing congestion-free travel 24 hours a day through the managed lanes projects that we're doing in Cobb County, and big ideas like the statewide freight network. Now, what is that? Well, that's a way of taking existing roads and connecting them in such a way so it gives people an alternative. If they don't want to go through Atlanta, they don't have to go through Atlanta. Now, before I go to this next slide, I want to tell our donors here, to the foundation, we do not spend a lot of money outsourcing our graphics. We do it ourselves, and it's evident. But we're saving your money. This is the most congested freight corridor in our states, I-75 from Macon to Chattanooga. You know, it is awful most of the time. Here's one alternative. US 27 is a road that starts up in Chattanooga, goes down the western part of our state through LaGrange, Columbus, all the way down to Bainbridge and on into Tallahassee. DOT just announced a project last week. It will, in a year or two, the entire section will be 4-laned, except for a small segment up in Somerville. We complete that, and then we build a new road somewhere around Macon, heading up, connecting into US 27 around the LaGrange. We create this arc, this bypass of I-75. But that's not all. Who's here has heard of the Fall Line Freeway? We've been talking about this for a long time. Goes from Columbus to Macon to Augusta. From Columbus to Macon, it's almost completely ready for traffic, and people are riding on it today. From Sandersville over to Augusta, it's complete. We just have a small portion from Macon on over to Sandersville to complete. Relatively little money. If we do that, we create this hub in Middle Georgia where we have room for growth, where we have great rail capacity, where we have a second airport that could move air cargo out of Hartsfield and free up airspace in Hartsfield. The trucks coming out of the ports in Savannah, if they continue to get stuck in traffic in Atlanta, the shippers who really care about getting their goods to market on time are going to move somewhere else like Norfolk. We're going to spend all this money dredging our harbor, which we think is a good idea. We need to make sure we also invest in allowing freight to move effectively. This also would allow tourists to go through different parts of our state. If they're trying to go to Disney World, they don't have to go through Atlanta. There are innumerable benefits, and it costs relatively little. Here is an example of our project list. Now, let me caution you, those math people, if you're adding up these projects, they're not going to add up. It's not going to be a fair distribution among regions. It's not complete. It's just an idea, and I'll tell you how we got it. You'll see the statewide freight network could be built out for less than $700 million. In transportation terms, that's not much money. The other projects came from the T-SPLOST list. I talked to people that have worked on the T-SPLOST campaign. I said, give me what you think in every region are your top third projects, the projects that everybody, and the ones that you marketed, the ones that really needed to be done and everyone agrees on. And we costed those out. Came up with a little over $2 billion of projects. Now, of course, we'll have to adjust that to balance things off by population. But we got $2.8 billion of projects that I think have a great impact on our state, and I think that most everyone could agree on. Let's talk about infrastructure. We talked about that earlier, and I think we need to understand where we've come and where we are. If you look at infrastructure spending per capita, this is state and local, we're actually doing pretty well. We're 22nd in the country. Georgia's not high up in many areas of spending, believe me. We're usually in the 40s and 30s at best. 22nd is pretty good. But look, it's not very balanced. In our capital spending, this is bricks and mortar, this is buildings. For K-12 education, we're 8th in the country. And in transportation, we're 41st. So we see this, and we see it as a great opportunity not to go in the other direction, but just to balance our spending. How about our taxes? Well, let me say one thing. We were investing in infrastructure and transportation for many years, in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s, but then we stopped. And guess what we got is traffic congestion. So we can no longer coast. We've got to shift more money into transportation. And I think the traffic congestion is the indicator that that's the problem. Taxes. Now, our taxes in Georgia are comprised of two components. And I'm going to try to explain it, Senator Miller. 7.5 cents per gallon is assessed. And if you look at Georgia, the arrow shows you that the little blue part is the excise tax, 7.5 cents. We're one of the lowest in the country. Our blue section is lower than anyone else's. Then we take a 3% sales tax, and we add that on. And in fact, locals also tax it, as well as there's a 4% state tax. 3% goes to the DOT, the rest goes somewhere else. But if you add it all up, we're ranked 18th in the country. Now that's pretty surprising to a lot of people. Now, because a lot of that is sales tax, of course it goes up and down with the price of gas. And so gas price is high, we're 18th. Just 3 years ago, if you look over to the right, we were 49th when gas prices were lower. So it's very, very volatile. But this really isn't accurate, because that's not the money going to transportation. We're not really ranked 18th in money going into transportation. Our motor fuel tax, actually, only the 3 pennies go to the state DOT. The 4th penny disappears somewhere into the state budget. The local pennies disappear into the local budgets. So if you just take the amount of money, the 3 pennies plus the 7.5 pennies that go into the 3%, I'm sorry, confusing myself, that go into transportation projects in Georgia, we're ranked 47th. So we need to invest more money. We believe you don't put all your eggs in one basket. We're going to have multiple funding options, and we're going to give you several examples. First of all, the T-SPLOST. We did pass it in 3 regions of Georgia, and it is going to bring in $1.8 billion into those regions over the next 10 years. So count that as with the checkbox. We've already done that. Tolls. The governor and everyone has already said we're going ahead with the Northwest Corridor, which is the managed lanes, new capacity. We believe you ought to use tolls where possible for all new capacity. Now, there's big debate in I-85 hot lanes. That wasn't new capacity. That's a whole other issue. That's not what we're talking about right now. This is about new capacity. It's going to take a while for that project to start bringing in revenue. So right now it's only $240 million over the next 10 years, but it could be a much, much greater source of funding. The 4th penny. We believe we're assessing the motor fuel tax as a user fee, and we ought to be spending it where the people think it's going on transportation. Now, legislators, we understand we're in a difficult budget situation. We can't do it all at once. We're going to have to phase it in. But this gives us flexible dollars that we can spend on transit or on roads and bridges. We conservatively estimate that this could bring in $150 million a year. It's $185 million based on the current price of gas. $150 million per year, or $1.35 billion over 10 years. This is a graph of gas prices going back to 1991. It'll make you wistful for the days of $1 gas. And you can see it's gone up pretty dramatically. On the right-hand side is the 3% tax on gas and how much that brings in if you convert it to pennies per gallon. So with $4 a gallon gas, that's 12 pennies. If it goes down to $3 a gallon, you're only 9 pennies. Well, that means if we see gas prices go down for about $1, that's $180 million less that we can invest in transportation. We didn't do anything, we lost all that money. So we believe we ought to look at locking in the current gas tax, make it an excise tax, convert the 3% to an excise tax so it will be a flat excise tax. We all know what it's going to be, just like many other states. It's a calculated risk. Price of gas could keep on going up. Our revenues would stay the same, but if they stay the same or go down, we will have that predictable revenue. Conservative estimate, $60 million a year or $600 million over 10 years. Finally, the last option, and this is a big one, and this is something we've been talking about for some time, is we need a fractional sales tax. I almost think we need to do this for all of our sales taxes because right now you can only apply 1 penny. What if you don't need to spend that much money? Well, you still have to do 1 penny. We need to allow counties to voluntarily decide, once their eSPLOST, which is the Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax that nearly every county in the state has, that goes only toward capital spending for education. When that expires in every county, they ought to have the option to replace it with a more flexible fractional penny. It could be 0.5%, it could be 0.75%, it could be 1%. But they could be used for both education capital spending and or transportation spending. What we think is most likely is you might have a situation where the school board says, you know, we really don't need 1% over the next 5 years. We could make do with 0.5%. And then you could add on 1/4 or another 0.5% for transportation. The other advantage of this is you could have multiple jurisdictions that work together. One of the problems with T-SPLOST regions, they were too big and they were too small. It was a very difficult challenge. They were too small to fit in these big statewide projects like the statewide freight plan. But they were too big because we ended up having counties in urban areas that had different wants and needs than counties in suburban areas. This would allow 2 or more counties that had similar goals in a similar project to join together and fund it with this fractional sales tax. How much is that going to bring in? Well, how much money do we really need to spend on capital and education? You've heard where we're going in education with technology and digital learning. I think the pressure to build more buildings like we have over the last 15 years is going to decline. If we look at North Carolina, they're very similar. Similar size state, similar demographics. And it's very interesting. They spend $600 million a year less than we do on brick and mortar for their schools, and they spend that $600 million more every year on transportation. So that's the upper end. You say that's a pretty good. Tennessee's even less, but North Carolina's a good example. $600 million a year. We're going to be conservative and assume that half of our counties continue the eSPLOST the same way it's always been, and the other half don't get down to North Carolina's level, but they're able to reduce their spending 25%. That still brings in $1.3 billion over the next 10 years, and that's phased in. We have where every county's eSPLOST, we know exactly when they expire, and when they would be able to replace it with this kind of tax. So what does that do for us? There are a lot of numbers here. It's sources and uses. Where are we going to get the money? You've got tolls, T-SPLOST, the fourth penny, the stable excise tax, the fractional sales tax. That's a total of over $5 billion of new revenue over the next 10 years. Where are we going to spend it? Well, we're going to invest in our intelligent transportation system, make it the best in the world. We're going to invest in transit and new construction projects. We're going to invest in the projects, of course, that were funded with the T-SPLOST, and that's $5 billion, but that includes $2.8 billion of new road projects and over $500 million of transit investment. So we need to reform. We've got to make sure that the public trusts us with this money, and we clearly have a lack of trust. We don't have all the answers to what we need to do in that area, but it clearly has to be addressed. We ought to be the premier intelligent transportation center of the world. We need to create a true transit network. We need to prioritize our projects based on clear criteria so everyone understands what our goals are and they understand the vision of where we're going. And we believe we can do this by rebalancing our existing transportation or our existing infrastructure spending without raising taxes. We're going to have a point. This will only get us so far. This is short term. Gas taxes are going down. The federal government's going to have make a big decision, and every state in the country is going to have to make a decision, probably in 5 to 10 years, of how are we going to replace the gas tax. Georgia's not ready for that right now. The country's not ready for it, but we're going to be there. This, we believe, is a step forward to get us to that point. So we have that much time, that window of opportunity to build trust, to develop this intelligent transportation system so that we're prepared when we have to make that decision. Let me stop there, and first of all, thank you all for coming today. We don't have time for questions. I'm happy to stay afterwards for questions on this. We're going to be preparing some studies on these ideas over the next few weeks, but we really appreciate all of you coming, and on behalf of the Conservative Policy Leadership Institute, I'd like to thank all our volunteers, all the people who put a lot of hard work into making this event happen. Thank all of you for giving up your Friday, and thank our sponsors again one more time for making this happen. We could not do it without them. So on behalf of the Conservative Policy Leadership Institute and the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, thank you for coming, and we are adjourned.